Hello and welcome to this Black Talk Radio News report and commentary. Before I get started on this report, I just want to share a bit of advice. I've been doing this a long time, for 11 years, and I don't focus on entertainment. I don't focus on sports. I don't focus on those things. I let other people doing that. I'm not saying they are doing anything wrong. We all need rest and relaxation from what's going on in the world. But there's so much evil going on in the world, and somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to read this news, break down this news, dissect this news. Someone has to tell you about what's going on, or else we'll all just be walking around with our head in the sand thinking that everything's honky-dory, as they say. I can't believe I just used that term. Okay? But I got a story. I've calmed down now. But I got a story about Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal, I have never liked Shaquille O'Neal, not even when he was an NBA player, and I'm an NBA fan, okay? But since he's gotten out the NBA, his character has really just shown me who he really is. You may not see it because you may just see the actor, the comedian, the wannabe rapper, the business mogul and all of that, but I see his character, and he has no character. He has a lack of character. And when I saw how he was jumping on this smear wagon or smear train of LeBron James, it just really made me angry. It made me angry, but life is too short. We got to watch our stress level. So I'm going to try to deliver this report to you with a level head. Now, I mentioned Shaquille O'Neal, obviously, and I'm going to talk about what he said recently about LeBron James and taking the side of this Houston executive by the name of Mr. Morey. I don't recall his first name at this time, but let me say this. There's a saying, and I don't know who said it, and I heard it recently, but there's a saying, and I heard it before, but someone reminded me of this saying, that a lie makes its way around the world several times before the truth can even get out of bed and put on its pants. And that is so true. And you know why that is? It's because we have a lying, corrupt media. We have 6 corporations that control 90% of not just what we see in the United States, but more than likely the world. But in the United States, they control 90% of what we see, what we read, and what we hear over the radio. And even listening to sports talk radio and these hot takes about LeBron James, these ignorant ass people who don't know nothing about politics, who don't regularly study geopolitics, but they're caught up in statistics, statistics and wins and losses for the NFL, NBA, baseball, or whatever. But then they want to interject into these political situations, and they don't be knowing what they're talking about. For example, I was listening to WFNZ sports radio out of Charlotte, and this guy was talking about LeBron, and he was saying, he was basically anti-LeBron and saying, they're marching for freedom and democracy and all this. And he was talking about, China, they got shops in China and stupid little stuff like that, as if we don't have sweatshops in horrific working conditions for people here in the United States. I mean, just it's like these people aren't equipped with any kind of brains. They just giving hot takes. They just commenting right off the top of their head without doing any kind of research. And I was able to get a call in that day and say, now I don't know about, the credibility of these violent, and I made sure I stress violent protesters, but LeBron, this attack on him is really unfair with all these businesses that's in China and what have you. And so I was like, we need to actually know what these protests are really about, and just don't tell me some freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. Freedom of speech protests get put down all the time here in the United States. So with that said, let me go to BTR Community.com, which is a social media platform that I run. for the Black Talk Media Project. Is just a way for us to provide a safe space in case we get put in Twitter jail, Facebook jail, but also where we can share our thoughts with each other freely on whatever topics we want to talk about. It's also a way for us to fundraise for our nonprofit Black Talk Media Project. It's just a $24 a year subscription, because you know what? None of these corporations, because of the type of content that I put out and the truth that I'm willing to speak, they are not going to underwrite the programming, okay? And not just because of the programming I produce, but some of the media partners on blacktalkradionetwork.com and what they produce, okay? So anyway, Shaq is pretending, Shaquille O'Neal is pretending to be a free speech warrior, but is he a hypocrite? Is the question that I want you to ask yourself, okay? That's the question I want you to ask yourself. So we got the BBC, which is the British Broadcasting Corporation. I think it's on actually, like public media, like a NPR. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what it is, the British Broadcasting Corporation. It could be a private entity. I'm not sure about that. I don't live in the UK, and I don't really want to research that right now. But this is a corporation in the nation that colonized most of the known world, okay, in Hong Kong. Now, I did a video about what's really going on in Hong Kong. You can check it in my archives, and about who's funding it, and is this an AstroTurf movement, or is this genuine? Do they have genuine reasons to be out there throwing Molotov cocktails or petrol bombs at police? Do they really have legitimate reasons to be destroying public property? Which y'all know, if we did that here in the United States, oh man, they've called the National Guard out on us for less, okay? They've thrown people in jail for less. So Shaq is saying he's backing the NBA manager over China feud. I mean, is there really a feud between LeBron James and this guy, or is this just the media making up something? What they call yellow journalism, where they exaggerate, sensationalize. But the point of yellow journalism is to convince the target population to be ready to go to war against another population of a different nation. That's what, look up the definition of yellow journalism, and that's what we've been getting in relation to these Hong Kong protests. So, I'm not going to play Shaq's comments. I'm not even going to read them to you. Just know that he came out in support of Mr. Morey, the Houston Rockets executive, who made some ill-advised comments, some uninformed comments, or making a tweet on Twitter about, hey, I support the Hong Kong protesters, without really knowing what it was about. And probably he, like millions of other people in the United States, is just a victim of propaganda, yellow journalism that is very pervasive throughout the United States. I also call it ill-advised because the Houston Rockets and the LA Lakers was playing in China at the time. You don't know how those Chinese people was going to react to that. What if someone was on Twitter and saw that, or somehow they got the information, and then next thing you know, rocks and stuff is being thrown at the NBA. But I'm sure the Chinese police, which really doesn't tolerate that type of stuff, based off of my cousin, who I interviewed once before after she came back from China, living over there for several years. So I'm kind of, and I also think they tend to be more civil. They don't get all the violent programming that we get here in the United States. But I digress. Now, let's get to the hypocritical part. And you're not going to see this in the mainstream media, because this story is going to highlight a U.S.-held political prisoner, one of the most famous political prisoners in the world, arguably, and that's one Mumia Abu Jamal. So when I saw that Shaq weighed in on this, I immediately recalled this 2013 story from a Temple University journalism professor. It was published on Prison Radio And if you give me a second, I will get it to load up. But the short story is that the name of the article, and you can look it up, is Shaq Attack on Mumia. NBA star censors film on famous radical inmate. Again, this was written on April the 23rd, 2013 by Lynn Washington Jr., who is a Temple journalism professor. Temple is in, I think it's in Philadelphia. I definitely know it's in Pennsylvania, which is where Mumia Abu-Jamal is housed. Y'all don't know who Mumia Abu-Jamal is. Was a Panther, a Black Panther as a teenager, later became a journalist himself. Do y'all remember when, oh man, my memory is escaping me, right? The Move family, John Africa and that group of activists, animal rights activists and what have you, they were way ahead of PETA and all these other people that fight for, animal rights and what have you. And so the Philadelphia police laid siege to their family bunker. I shouldn't say bunker, although it got turned into a bunker, as the Philadelphia police just fired indiscriminately into their house, knowing that children was in there. And it happened on more than one occasion. And the FBI actually gave C4 to the Philadelphia police, which from a helicopter dropped this C4 bomb on the Move house, which ended up burning up down an entire Black community in Philadelphia. Y'all don't know that history though, do you? Okay. And so anyway, Mumia has been locked up for allegedly killing a police officer who in Philadelphia, brutal racist cops at that time. And I think a bunch of them just got suspended for posting a bunch of racist stuff on social media. Okay. And so the history of police violence in this country is no joke. So anyway, that's why Mumia is in prison. He maintains his innocence. He used to be on death row. He was able to get off of death row. And there is a chance that he may win his freedom and win his appeals and what have you, because of how that kangaroo trial was rigged, and that's coming to light. All right, so this is some of what Professor Washington wrote in that article, Shaq Attack on Mumia, NBA star censors film on famous radical inmate. Was it simply a cold business decision or a callous act of censorship? This is the question swirling around legendary pro basketball player Shaquille O'Neal, who put a power move on Stephen Victoria, blocking this respected filmmaker's showing of his latest documentary at the movie complex O'Neal co-owns in downtown Newark, New Jersey, the city where both of these men were born. Representatives of O'Neal's movie complex have claimed in private conversations with Newark activists that they were canceling the film solely because it is inconsistent with their screening practices, countering claims that their cancellation sought to squelch the film because of its content. Victoria planned to show his latest documentary, Mumia Long Distance Revolutionary, at the Cityplex 12 on April 26. But as the final publicity ticket sales push for the scheduled screening was about to go into high gear, Victoria, and I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but he discovered on April 11th that Cityplex 12 management had canceled the booking and halted all marketing efforts. Theater officials reportedly even fired a staff member who had worked with Victoria. Okay? Is Shaq a free speech warrior, or is he a free speech hypocrite? I think the evidence shows that he's a free speech hypocrite. Now, let's talk about what these protests were about. Again, you can go check out my last video. But it has come out that the protest was triggered by not China, but Hong Kong officials proposing an extradition treaty between China in Taiwan and Hong Kong. Again, it's all China. Okay, it's all China. You know, Hong Kong was colonized and taken by force from the Chinese, and the Chinese in 1997 reclaimed their land. Taiwan, always been part of China, but of course the West is propping up a proxy government down there to prevent the unification of China. It's all geopolitics, okay? It ain't got nothing to do with freedom and democracy. So anyway, the case that triggered those protests was a murder suspect who fled Taiwan after killing his pregnant girlfriend. This is a pregnant woman that this man allegedly murdered and then fled to Hong Kong. Now, when he was in Hong Kong, he was in prison for money laundering. Guess what? He just got out of prison today. Just got out of, this is what sparked the protest. This is what useful idiots was screaming: freedom of speech, freedom of liberty, freedom and liberty and democracy and all this, without knowing the details. The media coverage made it seem like China, mainland China government is the one that proposed the extradition treaty, but it was really Hong Kong officials, because they had a person who was accused of killing a pregnant woman. So I don't know if they recognize unborn children as murder victims in Taiwan, but I know some people here in the United States do. I know that there's laws that if you kill a pregnant woman, you getting 2 murder cases on you. So that's who this person is. Now he's out free in the streets. And as I showed in my last video, this protest was funded. It's been going on for months. It was funded by a group that was set up so that the CIA, which would fund groups directly for this type of subversive activity in different nations, so that they couldn't be directly linked. Please see my last video about what's really going on in Hong Kong. Okay, so those people who wanted to exploit the situation started funding these protesters, gave them UK flags, gave them American flags, make it seem like it was about freedom and democracy. And these were violent protests, as I showed in my last video, with them destroying government property, attacking police officers with petrol bombs. Even journalists, I saw on YouTube, a journalist got hit and set on fire by one of those petrol bombs. So this is the case, y'all, that these people was out there protesting over, and what you've been on social media supporting. Okay, alleged murderer. I want to say alleged. Okay, he hasn't stand trial, and he's apologizing now for being the cause of all of this, and he may or may not go back to Taiwan to stand trial. But I do know Hong Kong officials and Taiwanese officials are trying to work something out on how to get this alleged murderer back to Taiwan to stand trial. Okay? So here's Shaq the fool on here talking about freedom of speech, and he doesn't even know what the root cause of this case was, because he, like many millions of others, are propagandized with lies so that they can drum up nationalistic feelings. Y'all want to talk about white nationalism. I don't see the difference between white nationalism and American nationalism. Okay, I don't see the difference. Now, getting back to Shaqs Character, guess what? When your company has been damaged by racism by its Trump supporting founder and CEO, speaking of Papa John's, okay, and you need a black person to showcase as the new face of your brand, well, Shaquille O'Neal is your man. Okay, he is your man. That's who you bring in. If you want a minstrel show, you call Shaq. Okay, because Shaq ain't got a problem of fronting for racists. Okay, he really doesn't. Okay, so he's supposed to be bringing a Papa John's to every HBCU campus. Can they be even more transparent about what they're attempting to do here? And I hope if you're on the HBCU campus and there's a Papa John, that you boycott Papa John. Because guess what? Shaquille O'Neal don't care about your freedom of speech. He don't care about whether or not you being out here beaten and murdered in your own homes by police. Okay? He doesn't. Let's not forget. Shaquille O'Neal is a Colin Kaepernick critic who did not support Colin's silent protests in taking a knee after being advised by a U.S. Army veteran, special forces, that, hey, when we have fallen comrades, if you really want to protest this police violence and murder of black people, United States citizens, then take a knee. Don't sit down on the bench. That can be construed as disrespectful. What we do in the military is take a knee. And so Cap started doing that. And guess what? He lost his job because he has more integrity, he has more fortitude, he has more courage than Shaquille O'Neal. Okay? Shaquille talking about, I was raised by my mama's husband and he was in the military and I was just raised to be respectful of law enforcement officers and what have you. He ain't got nothing to say about black people or anybody, because I hate that this issue has been colorized when there are hundreds of white people getting killed every year, hundreds of Hispanics getting killed every year, black people, let's just say U.S. citizens. But I do target black people, and Shaq don't care about you. He don't care about us. He has made it abundantly clear he's on the side of the police no matter what they do. He doesn't stand up for justice and the right of U.S. citizens' free speech, but he gonna come out here caping for some Hong Kong protesters, useful idiots of the CIA machinations who started this protest because a pregnant woman killing murderer was going to be extradited, or they was trying to put legislation in place so that he could be legally extradited and any other future fugitives from justice. But no, the corporate state media spin this into, oh, China's going to use that to crack down on protesters and what have you. If Shaq's so pro-police, I wonder how those Hong Kong police who have been hit with petrol bombs, who have been stabbed in trying to restore quote-unquote law and order and stop these violent protesters from tearing up the city. I wonder how they feel about Shaq. Shaq, Mr. I was taught to respect law enforcement. Okay? Shaq is an opportunist. He is a disgusting human being who is an opportunist. And I hope that wherever he having his cheap $30 Walmart, Kmart distributed shoes, he trying to pretend like, oh, I care so much about these poor single mothers out here and them being able to afford a shoe. So I'm a partner with Nike and I'm going to create a shoe that we just going to sell for $30 at Kmart and Walmart. Okay? Look it up, because I did. Look it up. I did. All right? And Nike sold, because he criticized Nike too, but Nike sold that subsidiary back in 2007. I don't know who they sold it to. I couldn't find that information. And I also couldn't find much information on where the manufacturing is occurring. How much you want to bet that it's probably in China or Vietnam or Indonesia, where workers work in sweatshops, okay? Since these idiot radio sports commentators want to talk about sweatshops in China. Okay? So anyway, that's all I got for you, man. I kind of got a little hype there, but I just cannot stand hypocrites. I cannot stand liars. And I can't stand people who fall for this stuff. But I can stand them a little bit better because we all have been brainwashed and we have not been taught to use what they call deductive reasoning. critical thinking. We don't care about doing our own research. We just want to believe whatever a talking head on the radio or television or behind a typewriter or a keyboard on the internet tells us. People, it is imperative that you support independent media, okay? Support independent media, because the corporate media is not going to always tell you the truth, and a lot of it is state propaganda. Do y'all know that the government abolished the law or repealed the law that prevented the CIA from targeting Americans with propaganda meant for people overseas? I'm gonna have to do an entire video on that. Okay, so the propaganda is real. The yellow journalism is at an all-time high, and I got LeBron James back on that, on this. Okay, please make a tax-deductible donation today to the Black Talk Media Project. Please share this podcast no matter what platform it has been published to, and you can also leave me your comments. All right, with that said, peace and blessings to all.